Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to share and subscribe the channel. Princess finally meets the human who saved her years ago. Her declaration shocked everyone. The massive black power armor, adorned with gleaming gold accents, cast an imposing shadow across the pristine marble floors of the Celestial Palace on Asteria Prime. Commander Craig Baldwin, former Royal Guard turned decorated military officer, strode through the familiar halls he hadn't seen in over a decade. His heavy boots echoed against the polished stone, drawing curious glances from the staff who quickly averted their eyes from his intimidating presence. At 42, Craig was in his prime, his dark beard neatly trimmed and his almost black hair showing only hints of distinguished silver at the temples. Years of combat and leadership had honed both his body and mind into weapons as formidable as the advanced armor he wore. Commander Baldwin. A young aide approached, bowing slightly. His Majesty King Ryland awaits you in the High Council chamber. Craig nodded curtly, following the aide through the winding corridors. The palace hadn't changed much, still the same ethereal blend of advanced technology and classical architecture that had awed him as a young guard fresh from Earth's military academy. As they approached the council chamber's ornate doors, a flash of violet caught his eye. A striking figure emerged from an adjacent hallway, a humanoid alien woman with violet skin that seemed to shimmer in the ambient light. Her long, straight violet hair cascaded past her shoulders, and her bright violet eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made him pause. She wore a golden corset that accentuated her elegant figure, paired with a matching miniskirt that managed to be both regal and alluring. Something about her seemed vaguely familiar, but he couldn't quite place it. Commander Baldwin. She practically purred his name, her lips curving into a knowing smile. Or should I say Guard Baldwin? It's been far too long. Craig maintained his professional demeanor, though his mind raced to place her identity. Your Highness, he responded, recognizing her royal insignia. Her musical laugh echoed through the corridor. You don't recognize me, do you? Perhaps you'd remember better the scared little princess you saved from assassins in the palace gardens, though I suppose I've grown quite a bit since then. The memory hit him like a plasma burst. Princess Lisha, the king's youngest daughter. He'd thwarted an attempt on her life during his first year as a royal guard, but the gangly teenage princess he remembered had transformed into this confident, captivating woman before him. Princess Lisha, he bowed slightly. My apologies for not recognizing you sooner. You've changed considerably. Indeed I have, Commander. She stepped closer, her scent reminiscent of exotic alien flowers. We'll have plenty of time to reacquaint ourselves. I'll be attending today's council session with Father. Before Craig could respond, the council chamber doors swung open. Princess Lisha brushed past him, her shoulder grazing his armor. Until then, Commander, she whispered, disappearing into the chamber. Craig took a deep breath, centering himself before following. The circular chamber was filled with advisors and dignitaries, with King Ryland presiding from his elevated throne. The king had aged well, his violet skin darker than his daughter's, his bearing still commanding respect. Commander Baldwin. King Ryland's voice boomed across the chamber. Welcome back to Asteria Prime. Your expertise is sorely needed. Craig stepped forward, about to kneel, when Princess Lisha's voice rang out clear and strong. Father, before we discuss matters of state, I have an announcement. All eyes turned to the princess as she rose gracefully from her seat. I wish to marry Commander Baldwin. The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. Craig froze mid-bow, his mind struggling to process her words. King Ryland's expression darkened as he gripped his throne's armrest. We will discuss your madness later, daughter, the king growled. There are more pressing matters requiring the commander's attention. Princess Lisha simply smiled, retaking her seat while keeping her gaze fixed on Craig. He forced himself to focus on the king, though he could feel her eyes on him throughout the entire session as the council discussed the growing security threats to the kingdom. Craig couldn't help but wonder what game the princess was playing, and one thing was certain, His return to Asteria Prime was going to be far more complicated than he'd anticipated. The following days proved increasingly challenging for Craig as he attempted to focus on his security duties. Princess Lisha seemed to materialize everywhere he went, each encounter more provocative than the last. The palace staff whispered about her brazen pursuit of the human commander, their gossip echoing through the crystalline corridors. Commander Baldwin, her melodious voice called out as he inspected the palace's defense systems. She approached wearing a flowing dress that seemed to catch every beam of light. "I was hoping to find you here." Craig maintained his professional demeanor, though his pulse quickened. "Your Highness, I'm conducting important security checks." "Perfect," she smiled, moving closer. "I've always been fascinated by human technology. Perhaps you could explain it to me." Her presence was intoxicating, her violet skin seeming to glow in the ambient light. Craig found himself explaining the intricate details of the defense grid, aware of how she gradually decreased the distance between them. "Fascinating," she breathed, her eyes fixed on him rather than the control panel. "Humans are so innovative. Tell me, Commander, do you find Asterian technology equally interesting?" "Your Highness." "Lisha," she corrected, her fingers trailing along the gold accents of his armor. "After all, we'll be married soon." Craig caught her hand, his grip gentle but firm. "Princess, about your announcement in the council chamber." "I meant every word," she interrupted, turning her hand in his to intertwine their fingers. "I've thought of you often these past 10 years. The brave human guard who saved my life, who showed such strength and honor." "You were a child then," he reminded her, releasing her hand. Her laughter echoed through the chamber. "I'm not a child anymore, Commander. Surely you've noticed." Before he could respond, alarms blared throughout the section. Craig immediately switched to combat mode, positioning himself between the princess and potential danger. "Security breach in Section 7, the automated system announced." "Stay here," Craig ordered, but Lisha grabbed his arm. "Section 7 is the royal quarters," she said, her expression serious. "My chambers." Craig cursed under his breath. "Fine, but stay behind me." They moved swiftly through the palace, Craig's combat training evident in every step. Reaching Lisha's chambers, they found the doors forced open, her private sanctuary in disarray. "A warning," Lisha whispered, picking up a damaged data crystal from her vanity. "They're getting bolder." Craig surveyed the scene, his tactical mind cataloging every detail. "You've received threats before." "Nothing I couldn't handle," she shrugged, but he caught the flash of concern in her eyes. "This ends now," he growled, his protective instincts flaring. "You'll tell me everything you know about these threats. Over dinner, perhaps," she suggested, a mischievous glint returning to her eyes. "My private dining room tonight." Craig knew he should refuse, maintain professional distance, but the security threat was real, and he needed information. "Strictly professional, Your Highness." "Of course," she smiled, though her expression suggested otherwise. "Strictly professional." That evening, Craig found himself in Lisha's private dining room, his armor exchanged for formal attire that still concealed several weapons. The princess had outdone herself, creating an intimate atmosphere with soft lighting and exotic flowers. She entered wearing a stunning gown that seemed to flow like liquid starlight. "Commander, you clean up remarkably well out of armor." "The threats, Princess," he reminded her, though his eyes lingered longer than strictly necessary. "So serious," she teased, gracefully taking her seat. "Very well." The threats began shortly after Father announced his intention to step down. As they discussed the political situation, Craig noticed how Lisha would lean forward, her movements deliberately sensual. She asked intelligent questions about Earth's political structure, genuinely interested in his perspectives, while maintaining the subtle flirtation that tested his resolve. "You see, Commander," she said, sipping her wine, "my announcement wasn't merely about attraction." Though her eyes traveled appreciatively over him, "That's certainly part of it." "Your Highness, A union between Earth's finest warrior and an Asterian princess would strengthen both our peoples, she continued. And personally, she rose, moving to stand behind his chair, her hands resting lightly on his shoulders. I find human males absolutely fascinating. Princess, this is inappropriate. By whose standards? She challenged, her fingers tracing patterns on his shoulders. Certainly not Asterian ones. Did you know our nobility often chooses mates based on strength and honor rather than bloodline? I'm not nobility, he reminded her, his voice rougher than intended. No, she agreed, leaning down to whisper near his ear. You're something far more interesting, a human who earned his position through merit rather than birth. Do you know how attractive that is to an Asterian woman? The evening continued in this vein, a delicate dance of professionalism and provocation. Craig maintained his composure, but each encounter with Lisha tested his resolve further. She was intelligent, passionate, and determined, qualities that drew him despite his better judgment. As he escorted her back to her chambers, now secured with additional measures, she paused at the threshold. Tell me truthfully, Commander, do you find me as intriguing as I find you? Craig met her gaze, allowing himself a moment of honesty. Princess, any man would be honored by your attention, but my duty can include protecting me as my consort, she finished, stepping closer. Think about it, Commander. Sometimes duty and desire align perfectly. She pressed a soft kiss to his cheek before disappearing into her chambers, leaving Craig to contemplate the dangerous path ahead. The assassination attempt came during the annual Stellar Convergence celebration. Craig spotted the shimmer of a cloaked figure on the palace balcony just as they raised their weapon. Without hesitation, he launched himself toward Princess Lisha, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to shield her as energy bolts sizzled through the air where she had stood moments before. I've got you, he whispered, cradling her protectively as they took cover behind a crystalline column. The warmth of her body against his chest sent an inappropriate thrill through him despite the danger. My hero again, Lisha murmured, her hands gripping his armor. We must stop meeting like this. Even in peril, her ability to flirt amazed him. The palace guards scrambled to secure the area, but the assassin had already vanished, leaving only scorch marks as evidence. King Ryland's reaction was swift and decisive. Commander Baldwin, from this moment, you are my daughter's personal bodyguard. You will shadow her every movement, protect her with your life. Craig bowed, though his heart raced at the implications. Yes, Your Majesty. Every movement. Lisha's eyes sparkled mischievously. How delightfully thorough of you, father. The king's expression hardened. This is not a game, daughter. The assassin will try again. Then I'm fortunate to have Earth's finest warrior protecting me, she replied, sliding her arm through Craig's. Shall we begin our new arrangement immediately, Commander? The following days tested Craig's self-control like never before. Lisha seemed determined to push every boundary of their forced proximity. She requested his presence during her morning swim in the anti-gravity pool, wearing suits that left little to imagination. She insisted he accompany her during dress fittings, seeking his opinion on increasingly provocative outfits. What do you think of this one, Commander? She asked one evening, emerging from her dressing room in a gown that seemed woven from starlight itself. Too bold for the diplomatic reception, Craig kept his eyes determinedly on her face. It's appropriate, Your Highness. Lisha, she corrected, approaching him with that graceful movement that made his pulse quicken. After all this time together, surely we can dispense with titles. Princess, do you know what fascinates me most about humans? She interrupted, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. Your incredible capacity for self-denial. Any Asterian male would have already acted on this attraction between us. Craig caught her wrist but didn't push her away. I'm not Asterian. No, she agreed, stepping closer. You're far more interesting. So controlled, so honorable. Her free hand rested on his chest. I wonder what it would take to make you lose that famous human restraint. This isn't appropriate, he managed, though his voice was rough. By whose standards? She challenged. Not Asterian ones. In our culture, this dance we're doing would be considered unnecessarily prolonged. When attraction exists, we act on it. Your father assigned me as your personal protector, he reminded her. And I'd never felt safer than in your arms, she reminded him. The memory of holding her during the assassination attempt flooded back. She must have seen something change in his expression, because she pressed her advantage, rising on tiptoes to brush her lips against his. The kiss was electric, breaking through years of discipline and restraint. Craig pulled her closer, one hand tangling in her violet hair as the other pressed against the small of her back. She melted against him, her alien warmth seeping through his uniform. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, Lisha's eyes were glowing with triumph and desire. Finally, she whispered, I was beginning to think I'd have to have someone shoot at me again to get your attention. The joke broke through the last of his resistance, and he laughed, pressing his forehead against hers. You're impossible. I'm persistent, she corrected. And now that I've breached your defenses, Commander, I intend to thoroughly explore my victory. What followed was both inevitable and extraordinary. Their first night together was a discovery of differences and similarities. Human and Asterian passion merging in a dance as old as the stars themselves. Craig marveled at how perfectly they fit together, how natural it felt to cross the boundaries between their species. Afterward, lying in her chambers with Lisha curled against his chest, Craig traced patterns on her violet skin. This changes everything. It changes nothing, she countered, propping herself up to look at him. Except now you can't deny what's been obvious since the moment I saw you again. We belong together. Your father will never approve. Father will adapt, she said confidently, especially once he realizes this isn't just about attraction. You're the only one who's ever seen me as more than just the princess, the only one who challenges me, protects me, treats me as an equal. Is that why you announced your intention to marry me in front of the entire council? She grinned. That was mostly to see the look on your face, though I meant every word. Minx, he growled affectionately, pulling her closer. You're Minx, she corrected, settling against him. And don't you forget it, Commander. Their new intimacy didn't diminish Craig's vigilance. If anything, it heightened his protective instincts. During the day, he maintained his professional demeanor, though the palace staff noticed the subtle changes. The way the princess's touch lingered, the softening of the commander's stern expression when she was near. At night, they explored their connection, learning each other's bodies and hearts. Craig discovered that Asterian passion was as intense as human desire, and their differences only enhanced their pleasure. News of Commander Baldwin and Princess Lisha's relationship spread through the celestial palace like a quantum wave, impossible to contain or control. The palace gardens buzzed with whispers, servants exchanged knowing glances, and noble families debated the implications of a human Asterian royal union. They say he makes her glow, one handmaiden whispered to another as Craig passed. Literally, the other giggled. Her bioluminescence activates when he's near. It was true. Lisha's natural Asterian ability to emit a subtle violet light had become more pronounced since their intimacy began. The phenomenon fascinated Craig, who found himself entranced by the way her skin would shimmer when he touched her. You're doing it again, Craig murmured during a formal reception, noting the faint glow beneath her skin as he stood guard behind her chair. I can't help it, she replied softly. It's an involuntary response to intense emotions. The nobles at the table pretended not to notice, but their antennae, a distinctive Asterian feature, twitched with interest. By dessert, Craig had counted at least 12 different conversations about human Asterian compatibility. Later that evening, in the privacy of her chambers, Lisha laughed about it. You should hear the theories they were developing about human physiology. Apparently, you're all secretly equipped with pheromone-producing glands that make you irresistible to Asterian women. And here I thought it was my charming personality, Craig replied, pulling her close. Oh, that too, she purred, tracing the contours of his chest through his uniform, along with your strength, your honor, your incredible stamina. Their passionate encounter that night left her entire body glowing so brightly they had to dim the chamber's ambient lighting. Afterward, as they lay entwined, Lisha traced the scars on his chest with luminescent fingers. "The court physicians are fascinated by us," she mentioned casually. "They've never documented a successful human-Asterian pairing before." Craig tensed slightly. "They want to study us." "Not exactly," she said, her glow intensifying with what he recognized as nervousness. "But they did conduct some discreet scans during my routine health check yesterday," and she propped herself up on one elbow, her violet eyes meeting his. "It seems humans and Asterians are more compatible than anyone realized, particularly when it comes to reproduction." Craig's heart skipped a beat. "Are you saying?" "Not yet," she assured him quickly. "But it's possible. The physicians say our genetic structures could align under the right conditions." Her fingers traced patterns on his skin. "They're quite excited about the possibility of a hybrid hair." The implications stunned him. A human Asterian child would be unprecedented, potentially changing both their societies forever. The thought both thrilled and terrified him. "Your father will have opinions about this," he said carefully. "My father," she replied with a mischievous smile, "has been receiving daily reports about your performance as my protector, including detailed accounts of how you've thwarted 3 separate assassination attempts this month alone." 2 were training exercises he arranged himself, Craig pointed out. "Yes, and you detected both false threats immediately while maintaining perfect composure." She kissed him softly. "He's impressed, even if he won't admit it." The following days brought new challenges as their relationship became the center of political discourse. Conservative nobles argued that a human consort would weaken the royal bloodline, while progressives celebrated the potential alliance with Earth. Through it all, Craig maintained his duties with unwavering professionalism, though his nights belonged exclusively to Lisha. Their love grew stronger under the scrutiny, each challenge bringing them closer together. Craig found himself falling deeper in love with not just her beauty, but her quick wit, her political acumen, and her unwavering determination to forge her own path. During a particularly heated council session about succession rights, Lisha shocked everyone again by standing up for their relationship. "The strength of our kingdom lies not in maintaining rigid traditions," she declared, "but in embracing beneficial change. Commander Baldwin represents the finest qualities of humanity: courage, honor, dedication. These are traits any royal line would benefit from." Her impassioned speech left the council chamber in stunned silence, broken only by the sound of Craig's boots as he moved to stand beside her. The gesture, though small, spoke volumes about their unity. That night, their lovemaking held a new intensity, born of pride and mutual admiration. Lisha's entire bedchamber seemed to pulse with her bioluminescence, casting everything in ethereal violet glow. "You're getting stronger," Craig observed, noting how her light now filled the room. "The physicians say it's because of you," she replied, curling against him. "Human passion apparently amplifies Asterian abilities. They're writing papers about it." "Wonderful," he groaned. "I'm becoming a scientific curiosity." "You're becoming a legend," she corrected, "the human who captured an alien princess's heart and made her shine brighter than any star." The morning Lisha discovered she was pregnant, her entire bedchamber erupted in brilliant violet light. Craig awoke to find her floating several inches above the bed, a phenomenon he'd only witnessed during their most passionate encounters. "Craig," she whispered, her voice trembling with joy and wonder. The physicians were right about compatibility. He pulled her back down into his arms, marveling at how her skin pulsed with waves of luminescence. The news filled him with a profound mix of elation and protective instinct. A human Asterian child, their child, would change everything. "Are you happy?" she asked, studying his face with those mesmerizing violet eyes. His answer came in the form of a deep, passionate kiss that left them both breathless, and her glow intensifying to near blinding levels. "I'll take that as a yes," she laughed, curling against him. King Ryland's reaction to the news was more measured. He sat in his private study, his royal antennae twitching as the court physicians presented their findings. "The fetus exhibits a fascinating blend of human and Asterian traits," the chief physician explained. "The genetic merger appears stable, possibly even superior in some aspects. The child will likely possess enhanced strength from its human heritage, while maintaining Asterian psychic abilities." "And the succession implications?" the king inquired, his gaze fixed on Craig. "A hybrid heir would symbolize the ultimate union between our peoples," Lisha interjected before anyone could respond. "The perfect bridge between two great civilizations." The king's expression softened as he regarded his daughter, noting how she practically radiated happiness, both emotionally and physically. Her pregnancy had amplified her natural bioluminescence to unprecedented levels. "Commander Baldwin," he finally spoke, "it seems you have managed to exceed expectations in every duty assigned to you, including some I never authorized." Craig stood at attention, but Lisha's hand slipped into his, their fingers intertwining. "Your Majesty, I love your daughter. I'll spend my life protecting her and our child." "Yes," the king mused, "you've proven that repeatedly." He rose from his throne, approaching them. "Perhaps it's time we made things official." The royal announcement of both their engagement and Lisha's pregnancy sent shockwaves through the kingdom. The palace buzzed with excitement as preparations began for the first human Asterian royal wedding in history. Their nights grew even more passionate, if possible. Lisha's pregnancy heightened her natural responsiveness to Craig's touch, often resulting in various gravitational anomalies in their chambers. Palace staff learned to knock very loudly before entering after several incidents involving floating furniture. "The engineers want to study the anti-gravity effects we create," Lisha mentioned one evening, tracing the strong lines of Craig's chest. "Apparently, our passion generates enough psychic energy to influence local physics." "Absolutely not," Craig growled, pulling her closer. "Some things should remain private." She laughed, her skin shimmering with delight. The mighty Commander Baldwin, shy about his abilities. The mighty Commander Baldwin, protective of intimate moments with his princess, he corrected, kissing her deeply. Their wedding preparation became a fascinating blend of human and Asterian traditions. Lisha insisted on incorporating Earth customs alongside ancient Asterian rituals, creating something entirely new and unique, much like their unborn child. During a private moment in the palace gardens, Craig found himself reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought them here. "When you announced your intention to marry me in that first council meeting, did you ever imagine this?" Lisha's hand rested on her slightly swollen belly, her glow soft and steady. "I knew what I wanted from the moment I saw you again, though I admit the details have exceeded even my wildest dreams." The wedding ceremony itself was a spectacular affair, broadcast across both Earth and Asterian space. Lisha was resplendent in a gown that seemed woven from starlight itself, her pregnancy-enhanced glow adding an ethereal quality that left guests breathless. Craig, dressed in ceremonial armor that combined human military precision with Asterian artistic flair, couldn't take his eyes off her as they exchanged vows in both human and Asterian traditions. Her happiness caused several decorative crystals to float off their stands. "My beautiful chaos," he whispered as they shared their first kiss as husband and wife, ignoring the floating objects around them. That night, their passion created such intense gravitational fluctuations that the palace's artificial gravity had to be recalibrated. Neither of them noticed, lost in their own private universe of love and joy. As Lisha's pregnancy progressed, her natural Asterian bioluminescence reached unprecedented levels. The palace engineers had to install special light-dampening fields in their chambers just so Craig could sleep at night. Not that he minded being awake with her. Their passion had only intensified with her changing body.